Hi, I'm Deanne DeMarco, and today we're going to be talking about the role communication plays in conflict. How hard is it for your team to have a healthy conversation in conflict? It's difficult for a lot of teams. Well, what makes it so hard? Well, frankly, some people just want to avoid the conflict at all costs. And then there are others that get upset and they verbally attack the other person that brings up the conflict issue. And then there's others that are frankly in denial. And no, denial is not a river in Egypt, but are in denial around the conflict and want to pretend that it's not even there. So what causes conflict? Well, usually there's a fear, an expectation, or a need that's not being met or think it's going to be met. And when there's a fear, a need, or an expectation that's not being met or thinking there's not going to be met, you have conflict. And what you normally see is the outburst of that conflict. And a lot of times it creates that real ugliness that we see with the attacks and the verbal attacks that come up with the conflict. Well, let me give you an example. The conflict that you can sometimes see in a personal nature, like with your family members or significant others, you'll see a door slam or you'll see dishes breaking. In the workplace, we see things like backstabbing, holding grudges, in fact, even sabotage. There was one corporation that I worked with where the sales group and the operations group, frankly, were in total conflict to the point where they were actually sabotaging one another to get a project done. Let me give you a little bit more on this. The sales group got a mall contract, and the operations group had to put in the final electricity and power into this mall. Well, they had a timeline of all the deadlines of things that need to get met when, and the operations group kept going, yeah, it's going to happen, don't worry, when in fact they were in major conflict and they were not willing to discuss some of the problems that the operations group was facing in trying to complete the contract on time. So what ended up happening is all the businesses that are in the strip mall were all ready for their grand opening. They had distributed flyers throughout the community about their grand opening. Some of them had television commercials about their grand opening. Well, when that day came, guess what? No power. There was a problem. And that was not good for anyone. Not good for the company, not good for the teams, and not good for the reputation. So what do we do about conflict and how do we handle conflict? Well, sometimes we have the conflict model. In the conflict model, we have reasoning and we have emotion. A lot of times what ends up happening is that people ignore the emotional aspects of conflict and they go right to reasoning. And they want to jump right in with logic and try to manage the conflict, when in fact they didn't deal with the emotional side first. And you need to deal with the emotional side of conflict. Well, there are differences in my research that we're seeing between men and women and how they deal with conflict. Also with different communication styles and how they approach conflict. So one needs to really understand all these different aspects around conflict and how to address it more effectively with one another. So the two major issues are emotion and reasoning. So the emotional piece you can address by saying something like, I can see that this is upsetting for you. I can see that this is important or something that you would like to work on. Would you like my assistance with that? And I'd like to help you, especially in a customer service. I have a whole program around customer service and how they deal with conflict. But one little tip is, in a customer service environment, when you have a customer that is expressing a conflict to you, a need or an expectation that's not being met or a fear, simply address it and take the lead. So address it and take the lead. Real simple response. So address it is, I can see that this is important. I am here to help you. So you're addressing it and taking the lead. And then a lot of times that helps calm the customer down. If you don't address that emotional piece first in customer service, that's when the swearing starts and all the really stabbing verbal attacks in conflict. So some of the tips are express the need, have a healthy conversation. Are you able to have this problem solved or not able to have the problem solved? Have a healthy conversation around it. And then lastly, now go to reason and logic and trying to manage it. One of the underlying issues with conflict is the ability to trust the person you're having a communication with. In an organizational, is the client able to have trust in the organization that they're having a conflict with? Is the client or customer able to have trust in the representative that they're talking to? Internally, do peers, are they able to trust one another? If there is little to no trust, you're going to have increased conflict and the inability to really resolve conflict well. So what are some of the things that we see? Just ask questions. You need to make sure that you're listening. Also need to be able to summarize what you have heard before you're giving your response and your thoughts around the conflict. In my workshops, I talk about listen and talk, and I actually have a little card that I distribute to everybody. But this is basically what that little card says. On one side it says listen, and on the other side it says talk. So when your conversation is between two people, and this works betterly with an interpersonal conflict between two people, if you have the talk looking at you, that means that it's your turn to talk. Because when the talk is facing you, listen is facing me. And when I'm listening, it doesn't mean I'm trying to come up with ideas on how I'm going to have a debate with you. No, 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 no. The listening is, am I able to understand the problem from your perspective? Then when it gets turned over and the talk is facing me and the listen is facing you, now it's your turn to listen. And the first thing that I'm going to say is, this is what I heard you say. Is that correct? Yes or no? Then I'm going to come back. Well, these are my intakes. And so the conversation continues. But this is just an easy, quick way, especially with family members, family spouses, to use a listen-talk process in dealing with conflict. There are a lot of different tips. In my original research around conflict, I came up with actually 29 different strategies on how to address conflict based upon different perspectives of gender or cultural differences. So I've just given you like the tip of the iceberg with this. So you need to understand there are healthy and unhealthy aspects of conflict. Unhealthy behaviors are things like people who are aggressive or not willing to speak up what their needs are or are overly dramatic. Some of the positive pieces are a person is able to address their issues. They are confident in being able to come up with information from their perspective. One of the keys in conflict is to learn how to fight fair. Now that's a whole different topic altogether, because there's a process of learning how to fight fair. But learn how to fight fair, learn how to have an on-task discussion. Learning how to choose the words that calm or that escalate a conflict, because there are certain words that help calm people down, and there are certain words that escalate the conflict to be more severe. One thing I want to leave you with is, if a person brings up a conflict to you, you need to know it is important to them. Because sometimes someone will bring up a conflict to us and we'll think, well, how stupid is this? And so you just kind of ignore it, or you kind of brush it off. Well, the person is not feeling respect from you because you're brushing it off. So if a person brings up a conflict to you, it is important to them. So if conflict is an issue for your organization, if you'd like to come up with some strategies, either in customer service or with your team, and how to have those healthy, constructive discussions in dealing with conflict, I use an analysis and assessment program, and I'd be more than happy to help you in your organization or your team in creating the corporate culture where people like to work. Give me a call.